Our first speaker for talking about microsurfacing will be Walter Percy. He's in sales and marketing. He's a director for APS, Advanced Paving Systems, Inc.
So I was asked to speak, Ken was asked to speak on best practices. Kind of wanted to take a little bit of a different approach and talk about, from a manufacturer standpoint and from an applicator standpoint, how we could sort of use this off-season to get ahead of our busy season and kind of best practices so we can hit the ground running. A little bit about ourselves: Asphalt Paving Systems, 6 locations. We have a main headquarters in Hamilton, New Jersey, second headquarters down in Tampa, Florida, and we have satellite offices in Lehighton, Pennsylvania, Long Island, Cocoa Beach, Florida, and our newest location is Savannah, Georgia. As I said, we are an emulsion producer as well as an applicator. We have 2 emulsion plants. One of them is in Hamilton, New Jersey, and one of them is Tampa, Florida. So we do produce a lot of the emulsions that we're going to be talking about in the presentation. Being in the industry, I like to say that we're constantly defending our honor. Although our company has been doing microsurfacing since, or slurry seals since 1981, 1982, what I run into a lot is that it's still perceived as a new practice. It's always compared to HMA. It's one of the struggles that we have is kind of that we're held at a higher standard. A lot of agency personnel are unfamiliar with the processes. The public's unfamiliar with the processes. And we just want to stress that one failed project does years of damage to the industry. Once someone gets a bad taste in their mouth, they will never do it again. So it's important when we talk quality, consistency, on really giving the best product and the best processes that we can to advance ourselves. So I ask myself, how can we improve? I always say that, ensure that we are giving the highest quality material and quality workmanship. Opinions on project conditions too. I mean, from an agency standpoint, sometimes we work as a subcontractor. The general contractor just says, just go out there and pave these ramps. I think that we should do some HMA repair. Just kind of bring up issues before we run into them out in the field. I stress education, education, education. That's why we're all here. And really, don't be afraid to stop and rectify an issue. We have a short season here in the Northeast. It's go, go, go. So we just really want to focus on not getting ahead of ourselves. If we run into an issue, stop and let's rectify it. And we're always trying to train our staff on good practices. So I'm sure everybody's familiar what microsurfacing is. It's a mixture of polymer modified asphalt emulsion, type 2, type 3 gradations of crushed aggregates, mineral filler, water, some other chemical additives that can be implemented in the field to help control the brake performance. So as soon as we complete our last microsurfacing job for the season, the gears are already turning. Let's look ahead. We're constantly on a search for quality material. What we've found is that local resources are not always the best. So what we try to do is pull from anywhere we can. Let's test these different sources. Our company's willing to travel for quality material and have a backup plan. If something happens with one of these suppliers, we want to be able to have a backup plan so that we can continue production and still maintain that quality. And consistency is something that I'm going to stress here. Consistency is key. So we're going to start off with our quality base asphalt. Again, consistent material is what we're looking for. We need it to have the ability to easily emulsify. And I stress again, we travel for this material. Quality aggregates. The process seems so simple when you're looking at it going down the road, but a lot of people don't realize really what goes into producing these mixes. When it comes to aggregate, of course, we're looking for it to pass gradation. We're looking for quality hard aggregates. And even if it's passing gradation, we're still keeping an eye on the critical sieves, because even though it's within the design, if we're at the higher end on the 200s, there's a lot of fines in the material. We know that's going to sop up a lot of that emulsion when we're putting the material down, and it's going to be a finicky mix. So just some stuff to keep in mind when we're jumping into the season. We want to ensure that these sources that we're pulling from can keep up with production. I stress on an agency level, that's why we always talk about getting these projects out early, so we can so we can give our sources a heads up on what our needs are going to be for that season, and we achieve our goals. And then the emulsifiers. Different chemical loads are dependent on aggregate reactions. We're looking for storage stability. We're trying to engineer for set times that we're trying to achieve in the field. And the reactivity to the aggregate is very important. So once we achieve these quality materials, we're sending them out for a mix design, trying to get a predictive model for successful application. But what we want to keep in mind is that this is predictive. These materials in these labs are being tested in a controlled setting. That's not exactly how we're going to be applying this material once we get out into the weather conditions that we're working with. Once we get the mix design, again, we want to keep an eye on those critical sieves. And just because, I want to stress, just because we're seeing passing results within the design doesn't necessarily mean that this material is just going to work all copacetic on its own. Just passing results is not good enough. When we receive these designs, what we try to stress to some of our people is look at the variances in the designs. There is room for fluctuation. Weather conditions drastically have an effect on this material. If you take a look at the mineral filler, for instance, there's a 1% swing. You know, the design calls for 0.5%, but you can go plus or minus. Calls for 1%, you can go plus or minus 0.5. And we run into different aggregate sources react differently. So a lot of times, like we pull from some of our New Jersey aggregate sources, one aggregate, mineral filler is gonna really speed that material up. So the more you put in there, the faster that's gonna break. Other aggregate sources are the opposite. The more cement you put in there is gonna slow it down. So we really want to have our crews and our foremans, our superintendents, our agencies on board with how this material is going to react before we go out. Calibration process, this is coming from being in the field and a management perspective, is I don't think the calibrations are really taken as seriously as they should be. We're trying to maintain quality. We're batching an asphalt product on the fly as we're putting the material down. I can't tell you how many times we'll schedule a calibration, we get everything all lined up, and the agency doesn't even show up. I mean, we're very passionate about what we do, and we strive on quality, but sometimes other contractors aren't. They'll run on the light side of the design to save on material costs, and it's really not the way to do it. I want to touch on the EMCAD system. A lot of the equipment that we operate for our microsurfacing and our slurry seals is manufactured by Bergkamp, and they have in the past couple of years implemented the EMCAD system, which for a contractor standpoint, this thing makes a huge difference when we're putting the material down. It's taken the guesswork out of it. It's an electronic mix control and diagnostic system. As we're putting this material down, this machine is tracking our production. It's tracking our material ratios. If the machine is to break down, this thing is going to give you a diagnostic printout as to what's wrong with the machine. It really speeds up any mechanical issues that we run into. This thing tracks your production, and what the agencies love about it is it prints a ticket at the end of the day. What's interesting about the EMCAD is that if for any reason, after we calibrate the machine and we input the calibration numbers into the EMCAD system, now we're going to choose our mix design. So we're going to be setting an emulsion set point. We are going to be setting a mineral filler set point, and the machine is going to put the materials into the pug mill at the metered rates to achieve that mix design. If for any reason that the oil pump was to slow down, or something passes through the oil pump, or stone bridges in the machine and the aggregate doesn't pass through the sensor at the gate, the machine will immediately shut itself down and will not allow you to operate if it deviates from that design. And again, it prints the ticket at the end of the night. It helps with tracking your materials that you use on the job. It simplifies quantity verification. It's going to show you that the percentages of the material are within the design. And it factors in aggregate moisture. I think that, from an agency standpoint, I think that's another thing that just really isn't focused on, is the amount of rain that we got last year. that moisture has an effect on this material. And what this machine allows you to do is test the moisture every day. You put the moisture percentage into the EMCAD system, and it factors that moisture into the mix so that you're still getting the appropriate amount of aggregate. What we require our crews to do on a nightly basis is run sample puddles in the stockpile before each shift. While we do this, we're going to run mineral filler adjustments that are within the design so we can see how this material is going to react tonight. We can see what 0.5% does up against 1% of mineral filler, and we time these puddles and really make sure we're hitting a set point that gives us the best quality material. Once we achieve the desired mix, we apply the test strip. This is another thing that I see with state agencies sometimes is, on the contractor end, we want to go, and I understand that. But these test strips, we do them for a reason. We want to make sure that we're making a long enough pass to ensure that the equipment's running properly. We want to time the setup of the material. We want to log all this information so that if we do run into an issue, it sort of helps us hone in on what that issue may be. Again, with this test strip, we're spot checking the application rate, and we're going to make some adjustments if it's not working properly, and we're going to run another test strip. Sort of goes into a little bit of the QC. So with all this, comes quality control. Our company stands by our material. We take it very seriously. Our crews take mixed samples on a daily, nightly basis. What we're doing is we're taking those materials back to the lab, and we're ensuring that the calibration is accurate on the machine first off, and we're just breaking those samples open. Look at the coating of the aggregate. Are we getting cohesion? The emulsion samples, this is going to help us back up agency testing. This is going to help us back up the results of the overall mix. Aggregate samples again. We just want to hone in and make sure that the quarry is staying within the design and that we're really ahead of any issues that might take place in the field. Stress the moisture again and the stockpiles of the aggregate. This is very important. Last year we joke, even though it wasn't much of a joke, that it only rained twice in New Jersey, once for 30 days, once for 40 days. The aggregate, it's very important to tarp these stockpiles. A lot of moisture within that aggregate is not good for the material. Our company really strives on tarping the stockpiles. Another thing is that a lot of agencies don't require it, but we screen all the material once it's on site. We're constantly getting in touch with our subcontractors who are delivering this material. You don't know if they were hauling a load of fill yesterday and it's stuck in the front of the dump truck. They pick up our material. This stuff has to be clean. We recommend screening the material on site just for quality control. So with all this being said, we try to stay ahead of the changing conditions. Weather is always our biggest factor. Also, are we placing it during the daytime or are we placing it during the nighttime? There is different emulsifiers that can be used for different situations. We want to make sure that we stay ahead of material changes and that we're tracking these test puddles. Another thing that I stress is because there's variances within that design, drive the previous day's work. If the color just isn't there, if the roads look a little light and we still got a little wiggle room, let's try picking the emulsion up in that mix a little bit just to try to achieve a better appearance. And it's also very important that we're talking with the lab technicians and giving them feedback just to ensure that everybody's on the right page. So again, I stress that because we're in the Northeast, it's such a short season that let's try to get ahead of this. What are we doing all this for? Let's be prepared. Let's get ahead of the issues before they occur. And we want to make sure that we're securing mix design and quality materials ahead of the season so that we can have a successful project with minor delays. So once we achieve all this is just an example of the microsurfacing. It's really a great product. I'd just like to stress on the fact that it's only as good as the base, and that's, from an agency standpoint, I like to stress, we run into a struggle as a contractor sometimes because it's automatically, it's like, oh, you're the contractor, you know what I mean? It's like we're trying to get one over on you. I mean, when it comes to pavement preservation, that is the completely opposite. I recently went to ISSA, and I liked what Chuck Ingram had to say about the industry. It's one of the only industries where all the competition can sit in one room and we're not fighting each other. We're working together to advance these processes and educate everybody on what's going on. So we just want to make sure that we're ahead of the HMA, and I stress the fact of, like, you know, we run into instances last year where we have some carryover work. So that road that was selected for pavement preservation, let's go out there and let's take another look at it, because now we wintered the job over and we want to make sure that it's still in the condition that is going to give us the most successful project. Just going to throw a little plug in on one of the unique items we do for the New Jersey Department of Transportation. It's for longitudinal joint repair. It's a big issue. In this application, we're doing 2 or 3 foot wide applications of microsurfacing over top of failed longitudinal joints. This item is also used to level rumble strips before the application of a thin overlay. So when we're talking heptos and when we're talking ultra thin, through the compaction effort, if these areas are not filled, it can reflect through the surface of the material. So that's where we come in and we level all this stuff off before we do a thin overlay. Just an example of a finished product here. One of the unique characteristics to doing this too is that the RPMs in an interstate situation can stay in place. That can be an expense to remove and replace them. We just simply cover them with a laminate floor tile, pave over top of them, peel them up, and they're still in place. It's really a good item for maintenance departments to have in their pockets. You know, I know in New Jersey, a lot of the maintenance departments go out to mill 2, pave 2 in the area of the failed joint. And what are you left with after they mill 2, pave 2 is 2 future joints. So this item just fills in the existing failure. It goes a foot on either side of the center of that crack to prevent any future spalling. And we've had a lot of success. So I just touch on how far have we come. There's been material, technology innovations, emulsifier technology has come a really long way. This is not the old school slurry sealed days anymore where we shut a road down, we do 5,000 square yards and we wait 8 hours for it to dry. Just the advancements in the equipment, like I talked about with the EMCAD system, really takes the guesswork out of it and allows a lot more control of the material. Because we're a manufacturer, I'd just like to throw in there the importance of tack coats. New Jersey Department of Transportation does spec tack coats for their microsurfacing. We started touching on that a little bit with PennDOT on a couple of projects, and we're seeing some pretty good results. Just want to make sure that we're selecting the appropriate material, calibration, and make sure we're sampling the material properly too. Just a little example of the Bergkamp M1E paver in a New Jersey DOT setting. See that trailer in front of it is called a flow boy. That thing is going to hold 1,000 gallons of emulsion, 1,000 gallons of water, 20 tons of aggregate. In a typical night, if all the stars and moons align, we can do a single pass of about 6 to 8 miles a night. A short video. This was taken in Georgia recently on one of our projects. These continuous machines are made to not stop. These support units are hauling the material to the job. They're backing into the paver, and we're switching trucks while the machine is continuing to pave down the road, so it sort of alleviates transverse joints in a typical truck mount operation. And lastly, this is a project that I like to touch on too. If anybody, feel free to stop at the booth and we could talk a little bit more. I have the Pavement Preservation Journal came out to this this specific project when we were doing it. We microsurfaced the Brooklyn Bridge for the third time in 18 years. It is the wearing course that they use on the bridge because of the weight restrictions. One of my favorite things to say is when I'm with a municipality and they're not sure if the microsurfacing will hold up on their cul-de-sac, 150,000 ADT a day go over the Brooklyn Bridge. And again, the material's going a long way. Any questions? I got a booth too. So.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.